Hi everybody, we're joined today by Aki, the trilingual creator behind the webtoon canvas series Villainess for Hire. She has lived in China, Canada, and Japan, and is no stranger to making comics that elicit deep thought and emotion, like her viral short comic 9 Lives you might have come across on Tumblr in the past. It was a blast to unpack Aki's story, learning about how her knowledge of Eastern and Western cultures informs her approach to shaping stories, her involvement in the Tonari no Young Jump competition judged by Assassination Classroom's Yusei Matsui, and how it kicked off her creative portfolio in comics, and her pragmatic approach to making comics that you can potentially use to have fun and enjoy the work. Here's Aki.
Aki, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
To start, do you mind introducing yourself to everyone?
Sure. Hi, I'm Aki. I would call myself a hobbyist creator. I am the author of the webtoon Villainess for Hire on Webtoon Canvas. And I've done a few one-shots that are floating around the internet somewhere. And so I'm also an illustrator. Yeah.
It's a pleasure to have you on. On your Twitter profile, you say that you speak 3 languages,
Yeah.
Japanese, Mandarin, English. As I see that you speak 3 languages, do you think this has an influence on the types of art or the types of stories that have influenced you as a storyteller today?
I would say yes, because I guess thanks for noticing, first of all. Thanks for noticing. But then I would say yes, just because I think when you speak more than one language, what it essentially means is that you have access to more content than someone who speaks only one language, right? So for me, I've been extremely privileged that I have been able to access like a mixed bag of media from English speaking countries, from Japan and from China. Nowadays, with things being translated from all over the world, I think it has really kind of shaped my influences just because they're all over the place. So they naturally find a balance somewhere. I can kind of see the differences with how stories are being told in all 3 different languages, different regions of the world. I personally think it's like fascinating to like see, and sometimes I want to talk about it with people.
I know it might be difficult to distill, and I'm someone that has looked at stories from a few different cultures. My parents are Indian. I grew up in the US. I've been a big fan of anime and manga, so I've seen stories from different regions, but I'm curious to get your perspective. As you talk or think about the stories that you've seen from different backgrounds, how would you describe the differences between the different stories that you've looked at? Do you think there are certain cultural themes, or do they kind of blend together and make it hard to distinguish the difference between one another?
I would say yes, there are definitely different cultural themes embedded in the stories, because if you just take the example of, let's comparatively look at 2 countries, right? The US and Japan. The culture is completely, at its core, it's completely different because US is much more individualistic, Japan is much more collectivistic, right? So a lot of US, like stories from the US or from the US influenced West are going to be about like self-discovery, about, someone emerging as a full individual. Whereas a lot of the stories from Japan that I see, especially the ones that haven't been translated, a lot of them are about how, someone, maybe if a child grows up, how they grow up into an adult that fits within the society of Japan, if that makes sense. So the themes at its core are going to be a little bit different, but on the surface, you will see a lot of similarities. Like the genres are obviously the same. So romance is everywhere. Things like action are going to be the same. So I think on the surface, some of them, they have a lot of similarities, but if you look at the messages and the themes, sometimes they are quite different.
So another interesting thing about your background, you moved from Canada to Japan. I'm someone that has experienced a lot of Japanese culture just through the stories that I read. It's very different when you're actually living in Japan. How do you think that, the fact that you've seen 2 very different cultures and been able to live in those 2 places, how has that affected the stories that you tell?
That's an interesting question. I would actually say I've actually experienced 3 different cultures because when I was very young, I lived in China as well. So I have experience in China, Canada, and Japan. I think that just having all this experience living in different countries, you get a much more broad perspective of just what the thoughts of different people and how different people's values really can be depending on the society they live in, right? Because when you live in different places, you notice that every place has its own set of values that people have. And why that's important, why that I think affects like the types of people, the types of personalities that are on the ground is because, different societies tell you that different things are valuable, right? So in Japan, being the same as others often is very much valued. On the opposite, if you are someone that stands out, sometimes you do get like a lot of like negative backlash from society, right? So I think it's really helped me write as a creator because I can kind of understand where certain characters' personality traits may come from, or their different characteristics, or why they think a certain way. And it's been especially helpful because I'm writing a historical series right now where their entire context is going to be completely different from ours. They're going to value different things from what we do. And so I think my background, although it's strange, has helped me there.
So let's talk a little bit about how you got into visual storytelling or storytelling through comics. How did you sort of develop your taste for art, and how did you get into storytelling?
So my taste for art, I mean, I started watching anime when I was maybe 11 or 12.
Mm,
And one of the first shows I watched was Inuyasha, and I was like
mm,
so obsessed with it. Back then, I think shows like Inuyasha and what was airing on TV at the time were other things like Sailor Moon. What was it? Oh, Full Metal Alchemist, the first
mm,
one. And then so I actually got maybe my start in shonen, like as
mm.
like just inspiration wise. And then not to go too much into my background or anything like that, but in high school, I was actually enrolled in a visual arts program. So what that meant was I had not, like normal courses, and then I had a visual arts component where on top of my normal schoolwork, we were essentially spending like 30, 40 hours a week drawing, doing art history, and all of that. So that's where I kind of got a foundation in how to paint. So
Mm.
I can do watercolor, acrylic, all that stuff as well from that background. So I think it was like a mix of those two things, right? Like being inspired by sequential storytelling, and then having a little bit of like a more traditional kind of arts education. And I took that and kind of like mixed it and did my own thing outside of school.
And then, you mentioned this art background that you've had from a very young age. Um, what pushed you to create your first webcomic? And let's start with the Nine Lives one shot that you did in 2015.
Yeah, the timeline is a little bit fuzzy for me because it was so long ago. But I'm not sure if Nine Lives was actually the first one I've ever created.
Hmm.
Um, I think before that, there was a story that I um, had entered into I believe it was the Young Jump competition.
Hmm.
That it was the Tonari no Young Jump online platform. So that's the platform where I think One Punch Man got started, right? And they were like running a competition. And I was like, they accept digital submissions as well. Because back then I think it wasn't as common to get digital submissions. A lot of manga magazines and stuff, they were looking more for like traditional like manuscript copies and stuff like that. So I was like, maybe I'll try my hand at it. I've always been interested in like manga and I have my own stories that I want to tell. Why not? And one of the judges at the time was Yusei Matsui, who is the author of titles such as, I don't know the English title, but one of his most famous works is Assassination Classroom. And then you might have
Hmm.
heard of that. He's one of my favorite shonen writers and manga artists to this day. So I was like, this is a good chance to get my work seen by my idol kind of thing. So I entered that. I did win like a small award.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, it was very shocking. I was, I think, 19 at the time. So I was like, huh, this was fun. So after that, I continued posting on social media, and then just one day had an idea. I think it may have been like a video I was watching of a cat or like something. Maybe it was like one of those goodbye videos that or are on YouTube, when people say goodbye to their pets, and I
Mm.
cry like buckets over that. So I think someone had said something in that video like, you know, I I know you're waiting for me on the other side to their cat. And I was like, oh, it just like struck me in the heart. Um, and and then I somehow my brain was like, 9 lives. What if they had 9 lives? What if you could meet them, more than once in
Mm.
your one lifetime? And so that idea kind of turned into 9 lives. And I initially tweeted about it, and I got a few comments, and I was like, huh, people, this might be interesting. It took me only maybe less than a week, and I just drew it out. I was like, and back then Tumblr was all the rage, so I was just like, post on my Tumblr. Maybe a few of my followers will see it. But it was really weird because I woke up the next day and it had like 20K notes at the time.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, oh my goodness. So no, I wasn't even on my phone at that point. It was still a desktop main thing. So I was like, oh my God, my notifications are exploding. And then the following week, it got picked up by like random people all over the internet. And I think it was on Reddit. It was on like what 9gag, if you remember that website. They
Yeah.
did not ask for my permission, by the way, which is okay. Whatever. I'm over it. It was crazy. It was everywhere, and people were telling me, "Oh my God, I saw it. You made me cry so much." And I was like, "Oh gosh," it was really overwhelming, to be completely honest, in a good way.
So you took that step in your journey, and I have to admit, I thought 9 lives was incredible. So I am one of those 20,000 people who were like, "What the fuck is happening here?" It was incredible. So you did that, and then you took a little bit of a break before you launched Villainess for Hire last year. So how did you think about your creative process from 2015 until then? Were there things that you were working on the side, or did you want to take a little bit of a step away before you returned to creating things?
Yeah, so looking back, I moved to Japan in 2016. And when you move somewhere new, you definitely need a period of adjustment. And for me, actually, that was longer than I expected. I
Hmm.
ended up not drawing that much for about 3 years or more, like almost 4 years. And I was really just adjusting to my life here. Oh, getting married. Uh,
Oh,
and
congratulations.
Thank you. And then I was also burnt out, to be quite honest. I didn't realize at the time, but looking back, I think I was definitely burned out. And I had my start really early on the internet. So I was on it from maybe like when I was 12 all the way up to when I graduated university, right? So I was one of those kids that was like essentially raised by the internet. And I had been posting online for like almost 10 years at that point. And I was just like, I don't know if there was anything interesting left for me to do anymore or think anymore. I think social media was really the landscape was starting to change a little bit at that time as well, with the shift more to Twitter and these other websites. Instagram was getting bigger, all these kinds of things. And I was like, maybe it's just time I take a step back and to input, right, instead of output. And I think that's quite important to have that balance of input versus output. At the point that I stopped, I'd just been producing for like how many years.
Yeah.
I sold at cons as well, and I maintain a pretty regular posting schedule on my like blogs, on DeviantArt back in the day as well. But I think ultimately that was the right decision for me. Although I think I missed the like golden growth period of Twitter and Instagram. I think if I had kind of persisted and continued posting, I would be further along in my art career. But I don't know, like I think I'm happy now. So
I like the way you said I needed to input instead of outputting because The demand on anybody who creates anything today is extraordinary. So what made you say, okay, there's a story I need to tell and I want to create this thing? What was the kind of point for you where you wanted to tell your next thing?
I think it was like a compulsion. Like I
Mm,
wanted to see what would happen as well. Like sometimes when you have an idea, you kind of sit on it. Like it's like a brain worm. It just like sits in your head and doesn't go away. I think if you've had an idea like that stuck in your brain for maybe like a month or two, then maybe it's time to see what you can do about it. And I think Villainous for Hire was one of those ideas. And I think where it emerged was essentially I'd been reading a lot of like isekai, villainous, reincarnation, royalty, kind of like romance stories, just from Korean platforms mainly. And I was like, why are all these women like unwillingly being cast as the villainess, right? Well, why is it that they are like unwilling to do it?
very simple question. I like it.
Yeah,
You're like, why?
yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so I sometimes like my personal opinion, sometimes reincarnation stories don't need to be reincarnation stories. It's I understand it's a way of like setting it up so that the reader can like easily go in the story and like understand it from a modern perspective. But honestly, sometimes the historic it takes away from it and you're like thinking, so this person is supposed to be like a modern character, yet they act like nothing like a modern person would. So it's personally, I'm not a huge fan of isekai stories that don't need to be isekai stories. But so my idea with Villainous for Hire was like, what if someone chose to be a villainess, right? What would happen? Why would someone do that? And I think that thought really kind of was the beginning point for this entire story. Just so what if, I think, was the inspiration for that story. And it had been stuck in my head for a while. So if you made a villainess the protagonist, then how do you write the antagonist, right? So the antagonist would have to be probably like a more heroic kind of character, someone who's a little bit, the opposite of the villainess as well. So that's where Lena came from. And then, how do I connect these two people together? Oh, one thing that actually helped me was inspiring was so in Japan, there is a concept called rental girlfriend or rental uncle or rental family, where you can rent like all sorts of people to help you do certain things. Um, and so I thought, what if there was a rental villainess? If I had a business and I had to fire my employee and I didn't want to fire my employee, what if I hired someone to help me fire my employee kind of thing? So that would be like a modern example, but in a historical setting, what could she do kind of thing. So I think for me, the process was really like starting with one idea and adding things on top of it.
I'd love to talk about your art style. I am a huge fan. It feels very, very mature in the sense that like you've been drawing for like a lifetime and it's like fully formed. I'm sure as someone that draws the panels, you may feel differently, but I look at it as a fan and I'm just blown away. How did you develop something that feels so polished, so clean, so just as a fan, there's a lot of visual impact that comes from it. What were things that you think you did in your creative process that allows you to create such stunning panels?
Thank you. I honestly don't have much confidence about my art just because there's so many amazing artists out there. I think a lot of creators may be able to relate, but you just compare yourself to them no matter what. It's kind of hard to get away from that. In terms of process, I think one thing that I do is I look at my work on many different devices. I try and think about what my work would look like on these different devices. So, for example, on your phone, it will look completely different than what it looks like on desktop. So, Villainous for Hire is really made for a mobile experience. And I try to tailor the visuals to that experience. And it's not something that I started off being good at. I don't even think I'm that good these days, but I'm still learning. And I think that's just a core concept that I carry.
So you also produce episodes, fairly regularly, and the updates have a ton of panels to them. How do you
Mhm.
manage, juggling what you do outside of creating your webtoon along with producing such meaty updates for your fans?
the main thing for me is that I'm very disciplined and routine as a person. I think it's just a part of my personality. Just to give you context, in school, I never missed a deadline my entire academic career.
I wish I could say that. It's so false memory, but props for doing that.
Thank you. I mean, so I've never missed an academic deadline in my entire schooling. I think one of the habits that I have that has been really helpful there is time blocking.
Mm.
So I block off 2 to 3 hours every night to work on the webtoon, and that's usually between hours of 9 p.m. to 12 a.m.
Mm.
So I think having that structure, it's just a habit for me now. Like 9 p.m. Oh, it's 9 p.m. I have to sit in front of my computer. I have to draw no matter what it is. And then once I had that habit built up, I could then start time blocking my calendar for the monthly, on a monthly basis. So I'll take a look at the monthly calendar. I kind of know just from experience how long it takes me to do each thing now. So if you look at my Google Calendar, it is actually blocked off really rigorously. Like, so I take about 3 to 4 days to write, 2 to 3 days to thumbnail, 10 days for line art. I kind of know what I have to do for this entire next month to be able to produce what I want to produce. And then I also batch create. So I create 2 episodes at once. It's usually around 90 to 100 panels. If you do things in batches, so if you line art the entire thing, you never get taken out of that flow, and you can do it faster than if you were working on it one episode or one panel at once. I think because switching back and forth between the tools takes so long. It takes so much time. I don't know if anyone else has noticed this or if it's just me, but yeah. So like I also do my work on different devices. So I have my iPad for outlining, and then I do everything else on my PC. So I think that switching back and forth would not be possible unless I was able to batch create.
And in terms of your character development, a lot of your characters are like their personality kind of punches through. Did you have certain places that you drew for inspiration for your characters, or what was your process for coming up with them?
I know there's various different ways creators go about this. I am personally like a story first creator, I think. So
Mm.
I start with the story. I think about what kind of roles are needed for this story, and then I cast my characters. So I feel like it almost feels like a film adaptation of some sort. So you have the script, right? And then you have the roles that you want everyone to play, and then you find the most suitable person. For me, I don't really necessarily think I want to base a character off of this person. For me, it's more like this role is open, and probably the perfect candidate will have these characteristics, kind
Mm.
of like I'm a recruiter or something like
Yeah.
that. They just kind of they kind of pop into my mind with those characteristics. And sometimes it's something like, that if they have a particular role in the story, like the prince, like a prince cannot be super dumb because they would be killed in history, right? Like if they have competition, they cannot be just like a sitting duck, right? So I think those logical like and that's just kind of like a logical thing that comes with that character. So when I think about the personalities and their development, that is where I think it comes from.
Mm. In terms of feelings or themes, what do you want your readers to feel as they read your comic?
Intrigued, maybe, is the one thing. Also, I think I want them to think a little bit as well. And I think that's why I've crammed so many, maybe too many themes into the story. I do think about theme quite a lot when I'm writing, and I don't know if anyone else does. I'm quite interested in like hearing if other creators do this as well. But I do think about the themes that I want to incorporate in the story before I start writing. I think for me, one of the missed opportunities of the villainous genre of stories is, there's no discussion on morality. And
Mm.
if you're exploring a concept like a villain or a villainess, and I'm not saying this is like a concept that's never explored anywhere, because it is in media and on TV and stuff like that with the recent rise in anti-heroes. But if you so with so if you have a protagonist that's kind of like a villainess,
Hmm.
she makes a conscious choice to do things that kind of benefit herself at the detriment of others. And I think that's a little bit relatable to kind of each of us, because I think at one point in our lives we've had to do something like that at different like obviously different extremes, right? So think about like looking for a job, you have to like come out on top of other candidates, right? Or if you're participating in any kind of competition, you want to be the one to win over other participants. But obviously it's at different extremes, and there's different levels of morality and values in there as well. I wanted to kind of explore that theme in somewhat of a relatable way, with a little bit of comedy to make it not too dark as well. And I hope it worked. I hope people do enjoy reading, and they are interested and intrigued in what happens next.
Yeah, I think we all have a little villain or villainess in us, whether we like it or not. So that's just the truth. You're close to 80,000 subscribers, which is an incredible achievement. How does it feel? I mean, you talked about the reaction that you had as an artist when you created your first one shot with 9 lives. How does it feel now that you have a webtoon that has 80,000 subscribers?
It feels surreal, to be honest. I can't process it, because I think I've gone very lucky, and Webtoon kind of really, especially in the beginning, kind of helped me promote it a little bit as well. So they put me in one of their like lists, and sometimes I get on the front page of the app, although closer to the bottom. So I think it's mostly luck for me. But I'm really appreciative of all the comments. And I think my readers they pay so close attention, and they are very like good at guessing as well, which is kind of which I'm like, oh shoot, kind of I feel like I'm playing a game with them sometimes, because I try and surprise, because you always want to delight, right? As a creator, you want to delight people, but I have to try and kind of outsmart them sometimes. I'm like, shoot, maybe this is too obvious, so I have to change like little parts of the script or what happens. But everyone's feedback is really, really like just important to me. And yeah, thanks so much, everyone, if anyone's listening.
Your audience, have you noticed anything in terms of where they're from? And I ask because we've talked about the different cultural backgrounds that you have, and then the fact that you are producing a English comic, being from Japan. Is there anything that you've noticed about your audience as you've built out your webtoon?
Yeah, so I mean, I actually write specifically for certain audiences, just because I know that certain things are not going to go up as well in some cultures as in others.
Hmm.
So I think Villainous for Hire was really made more for a Western audience. If I had been writing for a Japanese or Chinese audience, I think I would have some of the tropes and like themes would be a little bit different. But something that surprised me was it seems like I have readers from all different types of age ranges, which is really interesting. Maybe it is because there isn't like the romance aspect isn't as big as it is for some other webtoons. Because I had heard a lot about, webtoon is a very young audience, right? So I initially thought, oh, maybe I won't get too much attention at all, because I think my work is more for people who are maybe older teens, kind of like 20s, maybe even 30s kind of age group. Although I'm not limiting like who should read it, but I feel like it might appeal to these demographics a little bit more. Yeah, I was actually really surprised that people from all age ranges read it. And maybe I should start thinking a little bit about the messages that I send if there's like really young people who are reading it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good reminder for me.
You're like, I'm shaping minds. I need to make sure that I'm thinking through what people are walking away with. But we've enjoyed the story so far, and I know others are too. In terms of like things that you've learned, what have been the biggest things that you've learned as you've put this full production story out over the past year or so?
Maybe to just have fun with it, because
Mm.
I had a lot of anxiety before launch, and I was like, it has to be perfect. So the first few episodes, I took 5 or 6 revisions of those
Mm,
to make sure every line is like as it needs to be. And I think as I became more experienced actually writing long form sequential content, I have learned that I could get away with a few more, like adding like random like memes or like little
mm,
things in there that are just for fun. And some readers are going to appreciate that. And then I think one thing that a friend of mine told me was not to pay so much attention to what other people are saying. Like feedback is great, it's really important, but at the end of the day, it's your story. And you are the only one that can write it in the way that you are able to. So, like, I think that helped me not be so critical of my
yeah.
work. And yeah, I recommend it to other creators as well if you are kind of stuck or if you're like concerned about the feedback that you are getting.
So you talked earlier about, how do you balance what you're doing with all your other obligations in life?
Mhm.
Are there other things that you do just to keep yourself fresh, both mentally and physically? Because as we know, being a comic creator is hard on its own. Being a comic creator and juggling a bunch of other things, including a full-time job, is its own challenge. So are there things that you do just to make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well?
Yes, and I pay a lot of attention to it, and I make a very conscious effort to take breaks, just because I know I won't if I don't think about it or plan for it in advance. So I'm a planner. You kind of probably already know that. But I essentially plan for at least one break a week of me doing something other than sitting in front of the computer,
Mm,
sitting in front of the iPad or anything like that. So it could be anything from fitness boxing, which I like to do because it
mm.
works out your back, and you know how important those back muscles are for
Yeah,
artists.
yeah. Opposite set of muscles to the drawing muscles for sure.
Exactly, exactly. And that's, I think there, you get back problems really, back, shoulder, hand problems really easily
Mm,
if you don't take care of your body. So I do that. And then I also try to take walks. Even if it's just to the grocery store, I don't online shop for groceries for that very reason. Um, like, just going outside, touching grass, if you will,
yeah.
is super important. I would recommend that everyone does this. Please do this, young artists, if anyone is listening. Don't be like me. Don't end up with like a sore back and like chronic shoulder pain. Um, but oh yes, I also go to a chiropractor
Mm.
who is I don't know how he does the things he does, but it's really helpful. And so if you can set those things up for yourself, please do. Um, don't gamble with your health. Honestly, it's not worth it.
Is there anything that you want to see in the future of the webcomic industry? One of the things we really like is you're a comic artist that has an understanding of Chinese, Canadian, and Japanese culture. And the way that you tell stories is going to be different from others. And I'm really grateful that there's a place like Webtoon where you can tell that story. Are there other things that you want to see in the future as a member of the webcomic community?
I'm first of all just grateful to be kind of in this community and happy to be able to share my work and have it reach the people it does. I think one thing I would like to see for just as improvements for the future is better ways to monetize, fair working conditions, and a way for people who want to do it full time to actually do it full time without feeling anxious about their finances. I'm lucky that I am able to kind of finance my own work. But I think if I were trying to make it as a full time artist, as a freelance artist, especially, it would be extremely like anxiety inducing. And I don't think I could do it in its current condition. So
Mm.
better ways to monetize, better working conditions, more collaboration, maybe. Yeah, I hope to see it.
You mentioned there's other ways for you to support yourself as a comic artist. Do you have a wish that you could do this full time? Or are you kind of happy with the balance that you've struck with your outside job and being a comic producer?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm quite happy right now, to be completely honest. Doing like creating full time is a whole different beast. And I'm not sure if I am the right person to take that beast on, to be honest. And I think that doing multiple things can actually put you in a good mindset for creating, just because you're like constantly getting like a separate flow of new ideas and new experiences, and also building up like different skills on the side. I like to think it would make me a more complete person, if that makes any sense at all. It also helps me relate to people that are not creators, that are not in this industry as well. So, and I think that perspective is important. And there's like online discourse in this industry about like going out and like people needing to touch grass. And I think having something on the side is actually one of the ways that you could do that. Another thing is just with the industry as it is now, the demand on workload. I don't know if necessarily that is something I want to take on at the moment, but we don't know. In the future, let's see if there's a great opportunity. Please hit me up though. Like, I mean, I'm always happy to chat about like things like publishing opportunities and this and that as well. Yeah.
So, how do you think about your future? Are there certain things that you want to do?
Yes, I want to create as much as possible. And I do have another series that I want to make after Villainess for
Mm.
Hire. I'm not sure if it will be a webtoon or if it will be like, let's say, a novel or like something else that's a little bit easier on my hand. But I do want to continue in historical fantasy. Maybe I'll take on like challenging myself to write in different genres, maybe like YA or like whatever it is. It's important for me to continue to create because I'm a bit of a compulsive creator. I just feel complete when I'm like working on something. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Well, we'll be rooting for you. I'm very excited to see what you do next. And, as someone that has said, I'm like a story first creator, I like the fact that you're like, you know what? Maybe it's a novel next time.
Yeah.
I think people are excited to see whatever story you have next. Are you ready to close things out with rapid fire round?
Sure, go for it.
What fictional character best describes your personality?
Oh my God, I actually looked this up because I could not think of anything. And so I looked up my, characters that share your MBTI, and I'm an INTJ. So actually, a lot of the fictional characters that have the same MBTI are like villains. And I'm like, huh. So like, think like Walter White or like Yagami Light or like, that those kinds of characters. But I think maybe one person that I felt like I relate to recently is Beth Harmon from Queen's Gambit, but I'm
Mm.
not nearly as confrontational nor ambitious. There was something that I really admired about her as I was watching that series, maybe like her tenacity. I think she might be pretty close. There's also this character from this Chinese drama. It's called The Story of Minglan. And her name is Minglan. She's the protagonist. I would say I kind of aspire to be like her because she's like a woman who lived in a feudal society and really made the best out of her situation and kind of always lived looking forward. And I think that's what I want to manifest for myself.
Our producer Jacob is a INTJ as well, and if I had
Ooh.
known you were an INTJ, I would be a little bit on guard because I remember looking at this list and I remember seeing Walter White, and I think I also saw like Sasuke on there, and I'm like,
Oh
okay,
my God, yeah.
I'm dealing with some killers, so I'm an ENFJ. I would be on guard, but yeah, Beth Harmon, good shout. Which three comics would you take with you on a desert island?
If I had to be on a desert island, I might want to take series that make me happy. Maybe
Mm.
like really happy,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm in a desolate situation. So maybe things that I watched as a teen that I really enjoyed, like Full Metal Alchemist, One Piece, Honey and Clover. I think those are like some of my favorite series as a teen and even to this day. But yeah, shonen. Maybe, I could like make a raft out of my One Piece volumes and like,
That's the thing with One
escape.
Piece, you're gonna get volume, and you can do so much
Yeah.
with that,
Yeah, you could just
right?
make a raft and like paddle myself to safety.
What's your favorite scene from any comic, manga, manhwa, webtoon that pops into your mind?
Oh my goodness. There's a couple. I think one that just came really top of mind is there's this series called One Punch Man. I think everyone knows, but there's one hero in it called Licenseless Writer, and he's like a C rank, like a extra character. I really loved that one scene where he had to fight against an enemy that he had like no chance of beating. I think it was the Sea King. Was that what he was called? It was like this giant like lizard creature.
The
And
Moomin Rider, that guy.
yeah, Mumen Rider, I think is the Japanese name. And he was just like, no, it's not about whether I can win or not. It's about me having a face here, right here, right now. And I was like, oh, so I think that's one that comes to mind. Oh, there's so many from webtoons though, but if I get started, I'll continue talking. So I'll just say that one.
Moomin Rider is like how I go through life. It's like, yeah, we're pretty ill equipped to deal with whatever's happening, but we're gonna go through it. So
I like it.
I resonate with that one. If you could have dinner with any creator, who would it be? Any comic creator?
Yeah, so I think Yusei Matsui sensei, so again, the
Mm.
author for Nogami Nero, Assassination Classroom, and a few other series. I think he has really interesting ideas, and I would love to pick his brain. He's just, if you ever read Nogami Nero, it's like this really super interesting series.
Mm.
It's kind of old, but I would recommend it just because I've never seen like these things being like just some of his ideas are just, is this really Shonen Jump kind of thing? So yeah, I would love to chat with him if I ever have the chance.
And then finally, if you were able to get dinner with any character, who would it be?
Any character, so any fictional character is okay, right?
Yes.
Uncle Iroh from The Last Airbender. I think it would help my character development. He would help me develop into a better person, hopefully. So, yeah, he's so wise. I would love to become him one day.
It's a good mix of like being able to have fun and being able to learn from someone. So yeah,
Yeah.
he'd be a great one. Well, Akimiya, thank you so much for taking some time to join us on the show today. Listener, please go onto Webtoon and check out Villainous for Hire. From there, you'll be able to find Akimiya's card, and from there, you'll be able to go to their Instagram, Twitter, and find all sorts of goodies buried underneath. Please give Villainous for Hire a read. I think once you read half an episode worth of story and look at the art, you'll understand what we're talking about here. But Aki, thank you so much for taking the time, and it was an absolute pleasure to have you today.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Thank you for joining us today. If you have any feedback or want to be featured as our next guest, please write to us at pixelsandpanelspod@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, like, or give us a 5-star rating. See you all next week.